Hello again. Whenever I mention that Chinese students and those from other Far Eastern countries tend to achieve very well academically, somebody is sure to claim that this is a cultural tradition, as though that explains the matter and no more needs to be said. This is, well, at least to me, very unsatisfactory. It leaves unanswered the question of why families from the Far East should have a culture which values learning to play the piano more than it does proficiency in football or baseball, say. Or why such families should be more likely to use spare money paying for a tutor in mathematics rather than buying their children designer clothes or flashy trainers. Saying it's their culture tells us nothing and discourages us from digging deeper, which might possibly be why people say this. Okay, a personal thing now. I was a horribly strict parent. I didn't send my daughter to school for a single day. When she was growing up, I was never content with anything at all, less than 100%, when she took tests, examinations, or questions that I set her. One of my catchphrases was A's are for losers. In British examinations, GCSEs, A-levels and so on at that time, grades went up to A and exceptionally good papers were awarded an A star. For me, that was the standard. It was A star or nothing. I'm reminded of this when I see what are known as Asian dad jokes on the internet. These are all over the internet and show a stern Chinese father supposedly speaking to his child. They always make me laugh because I honestly can't see what's wrong with the man's sentiments. For example, in one he is saying to his child, I only want you to be happy and a doctor. In another, the caption is, after you finish your homework, you can play the piano. My favourite is, your sister got a B in her test. Congratulations, you're an only child. I have to say also that I've got some Chinese friends that look at these jokes and they can't see really that they're funny either. They read them po-faced and to them the sentiments being expressed are perfectly normal. You see, the humour in these jokes is that they indicate that many parents of East Asian heritage have very high expectations of their children. The emphasis is on the child taking responsibility for his or her success or failure. There's no question of a Chinese child blaming racial prejudice for not getting on in a white society. It's accepted by the family, the child and everybody else that it's their own hard work which will get them to become doctors, accountants or lawyers. They're not going to be looking for affirmative action or hoping for contextual offers from a university as happens in Britain. This attitude is very close to the famous Protestant work ethic. The individual must stick at it, strive to reach the top by working hard, being very self-disciplined and of course thrifty, always planning for the future and always delaying gratification. No wonder that some colleges in the United States are now enforcing unofficial quotas designed to limit the number of Chinese and Korean students they admit. I'll have to do a video about that as well because it's quite a scandal. The question we need to ask really is how something so uncannily similar to the Protestant work ethic arose in both Europe and the Far East, and yet not in Africa. I mean, let's face it, everything about Chinese society is completely different from both Protestant Europe and Catholic Europe. The language is different, religion, the philosophy, the whole way of life. They're all wholly dissimilar, and yet they both share a common ideal, that of personal responsibility and the need for the individual to be answerable for his actions and success. This is quite weird when you think about it, that these very similar ideas should have arisen so far apart and separately. I'm thinking now of books like Samuel Smiles, that used to be really popular, certainly when I was a child. Uh, some older readers might remember the book Self-Help, which was very, very popular. And when we read it, it could almost have been written by a Chinese person. This attitude that we must work hard to make our own way in the world and not look for such excuses as economic disadvantage or racism was once an integral part of the British and American psyche, just as it still is for most East Asians. It's something which appears to be quite literally in the DNA of people from Europe and East Asia, but absent generally from those of African heritage. I mean, obviously there are exceptions to these general rules, but by and large the stereotypes hold true. There's an exceedingly widespread feeling among black people in Britain and America that they have been held back by white people, that white people are somehow devils that have stopped the black man from succeeding. Sometimes they blame white people, other times it's the Chinese and Koreans that are in their way, or the Jews, the Jewish landlord and the Jewish factory owner that's holding them back. There's a host of others, I won't go into them all, it's really awful. But that's why the failure to thrive of black British people and African Americans can always be laid at the door of others. It's why things like colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade are so important to so many black people, why they're so dear, these concepts are held dear to them. They provide a ready-made excuse for present-day failure. I mean, just imagine if Chinese people adopted the same mindset today, started moaning about the Opium Wars and demanding Chinese History Month. The idea is so grotesque it makes us laugh, but the Chinese have suffered quite as much from colonialism and foreign interference in their countries as Africa has. Korea could also tell a few stories about what's befallen it over the centuries. The same thing goes for other nations in the Far East. The difference is that instead of people from East Asia demanding that we have a Chinese History Month and that there should be affirmative action to help them, they simply get on with their lives and plough their own furrow. I invite viewers to consider what has produced these very different attitudes to past sufferings and present problems. Why do those of Chinese and European heritage simply get on and do their best, relying upon their own efforts to make their way, while so many black people appear to be mired in the past and obsessed with the idea that others must make amends for the past by helping them now to get jobs or obtain places at good universities? I have an idea that neither the Protestant work ethic nor the Chinese culture of valuing education for their children are causes of success. I see them rather as symptoms of an essential quality which both Europeans and those from the Far East have, and those of African heritage very often do not. It's important not to muddle up cause and effect, which is what we do when we claim that Chinese people do well academically because of their culture